Good morning. I think we should get going. Thank you so much for coming. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's invited speaker, Sarah Anderson. I invited Ms. Anderson to visit with us because I wanted you to hear more about the training that she does for our Office of Equity. Ms. Anderson is a native of Colorado. She got her bachelor's degree at the Colorado State University. She majored in community studies and minored in women's studies, and then spent a great deal of her time in nonprofit organizations working with minorities, with oppressed folks and folks who really did not have a good access to education. In her spare time, she worked a lot with the students who did not have a proper access to educational tools and opportunities, and helped them get enrolled in colleges and fill out the application. So as you can see, she's devoted a good part of her professional life to helping with inclusion and diversity. She decided to go on to get the master's degree that she completed in social studies at Washington University in St. Louis, and she joined us after completing her master's work. The reason I really wanted Ms. Anderson to come and talk to us is because she actually does a lot of training for Title IX, and she is also an outreach coordinator. So please feel free to ask any questions you may have. This is our opportunity to know her very well and to know our Office of Equity better. Without further ado, Ms. Sarah Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You remembered all of that. Is everyone able to hear me correctly? Or loud and clear? Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me? Good, thumbs up. Okay, I also brought along my colleague, Will, and Will can introduce himself as well. He also is in our office.
Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Will DeWeese, and I'm one of the co-directors in the Office of Equity. I oversee the Title IX side, so really specifically looking at the sexual misconduct and Title IX compliance for the Office of Equity.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about some sexual assault, discrimination, sexual misconduct type stuff. So we did want to issue out a content warning. If at any reason you all need to take a step out, or if we talk about things that may be triggering in some way, please take a step out. We'll be hanging out outside in case you want to ask us more questions in private. For that, we like to be very interactive. It is more fun when you participate. I see that everyone's sitting in the back, and I promise we do not bite. So if you do want to take a step up closer, feel free to do so. So a little bit about our office. So mainly what our office does is we stop, prevent, and remedy any discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, and any related retaliation to reports made in our office. In our office, we also have someone by the name of Lauren, and she helps with reasonable ADA accommodations for employees. So if at any reason you are finding that you need accommodations, give Lauren a call, and she'll walk you through that process. Where I come in and some other folks in my office is we provide education on topics related to what our office does. So that can be all on what you're receiving today, our policies, and just understanding who we are and what that looks like. But we can go further into power, privilege, understanding identity, understanding the cycle of violence and different things like that. So if there is something that you want me to come and talk to in your department or in meetings, feel free to give me a call. And then we also are involved in policy making to make sure our campus is safe and inclusive. Any questions so far about that? That's kind of the gist of it. Okay. All right, so there are a few policies that are covered under our office that we go by. The first two are what we will be talking about today, our non-discrimination policy, and then our newly named sexual misconduct, intimate partner abuse, and stalking policy. I also just like to put this up here because most folks don't even know we have an animals on campus policy. Like, what is that? So you can always go to our office or online and just look up some of our policies, because anything that's written there, you are protected by it and expected to abide by it as well. All right, well, this is you.
All right. So here at the university, we have 15 protected characteristics defined in our non-discrimination policy. Many of them are kind of what you would expect to be in a non-discrimination policy: race, religion, color, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, and then a few are just what the regents have decided also need to be protected characteristics, such as political affiliation, political philosophy. Again, just ensuring that all kind of perspectives are welcome at the university and protected in the same way. As we talk about the different types of potential problems coming with the discrimination policy, we have a couple of different behaviors that we prohibit. So we have discrimination, which is really differential treatment or treating someone treating someone differently because of one of these protected characteristics. So treating them either more favorably or less favorably in comparison to someone else who doesn't hold that identity. Harassment is experiencing some kind of hostility or exhibiting hostility towards somebody based, again, on one of these protected characteristics. So what we're looking for in terms of these policies is really severe, pervasive, ongoing behavior that's creating some kind of a negative impact on that person. So an offensive comment or something that you don't agree with, or somebody says something that's just offensive, on a one-time occurrence isn't likely to rise to the level of a policy violation. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't address that or bring that to our office's attention or a supervisor's attention, because there's a lot that we can do on the low-level side of things to prevent that from becoming the ongoing, pervasive discrimination incident. So our office engages in a lot of informal resolution where we might call somebody in and just talk through, hey, this is what you were alleged to have said. Maybe let's think about how that impacted the person who experienced that or who overheard that comment. And then here's some suggested language that you might work with moving forward. We clarify the policy. We might document that situation to ensure that we have a record that we had that conversation. So if the behavior were to continue, then we might have a little bit more information to look at moving forward if it does continue and start creating that hostile environment.
And the university is required to provide accommodations for 3 of our protected characteristics. Can anyone guess what those 3 are based off of this list?
This is the part where you participate.
Yeah. So what 3 are we thinking? And we can sit here in silence all day. It's okay. Disability. Yes, disability. Pregnancy. One more. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Y'all are awake this morning.
So here's a little case study, so we can talk about, based off of that definition and what Will said with discrimination, what would this fall under? So one pupil asked for flexibility in gym class during the month of Ramadan because they'll be fasting. The request is denied and they are required to participate. Another pupil requests flexibility to miss the next 5 Friday afternoons to attend confirmation classes at their church. Their request is granted. What are our thoughts about that? Is this discrimination, harassment, neither? I see some nods, so are we thinking, what are we thinking? Discrimination?
Discrimination.
Okay, why? Yeah, so at face value, if this was to come to our office, we would be looking and say, okay, this may be discrimination. We'll dig a little deeper to see kind of what was the context, what was going on, but just with the information we're given, we would agree with you. Anything you want to add to that? Okay. An academic advisor tells a pregnant student that she probably isn't cut out for the science program. Depends?
It depends.
On what? Let's talk about it. The context, right, is kind of vague. We don't know if maybe the student's grades were already falling behind. Is this a grade issue? Is this a pregnancy issue? Are there other things? So we do have to look at the context of that. Okay, thank you for participating. The library staff asked a student of color to show their ID.
Context, I'm hearing?
Yep.
What about the context would we want to be looking at, you think? Are they asking everyone? Yeah, absolutely. So again, this would be if they're treating one person more favorably, the student of color less favorably, they're not asking the white students to show their ID, then that definitely could be a case of discrimination.
The research lab requires that men wear full-length pants, but the women are allowed to wear skirts above the knee. I hear so many whispers, but no one's saying anything to us. What are our thoughts? Poor lab safety. It depends on the kind of work that they do. Someone said something else that I wasn't able to hear. Well, do you want to take this one on? Talking about it. Oh, go ahead. Yes. Yep. Yep.
It really is that simple, folks.
Yep.
And these are some of the things that we still see in dress codes here at the university. So certainly if you see that and want to bring that to our attention, we're happy to have some conversations with the departments about kind of what a dress code should actually capture. This could very well be a case of sex discrimination here because women have more options in their dress code than men.
All right. Want to talk about the sexual assault?
Sure. All right. So our policy, we revised this policy this year, really in the last academic year, and then it went live October 4th. It was the sexual misconduct policy. We renamed it, as Sarah mentioned, to the sexual misconduct, intimate partner abuse, and stalking policy, mainly because there are a lot of issues of intimate partner abuse and stalking that aren't really sexual in nature. So we just wanted to be a little more inclusive and make sure that folks knew specifically what we were talking about. So it prohibits all forms of sexual misconduct. Sexual assault, we have two forms: non-consensual sexual intercourse and non-consensual sexual contact. Sexual exploitation, taking sexual advantage of someone without their permission or consent for your pleasure or gain. Intimate partner abuse, abuse of any nature between intimate partners or ex-partners. We expanded the definition of this to include a few different types of violence. So kind of looking at psychological abuse, monetary abuse, potentially looking at either access to a pet, harming a pet in a domestic relationship could be a form of intimate partner abuse. Prior to the policy revision, it really was narrowly looking at physical violence. So we, in working with the policy for a couple years, realized that there were a lot of problematic behaviors that were happening within relationships that weren't specifically captured within our policy. So we thought it was helpful to expand that definition. And that definition is in alignment with the Department of Justice definition. It's the same definition that they use there. Stalking is repeated or unwanted contact, which causes a person to experience some kind of fear of their safety, or they change their pattern of behavior. So they might be taking different routes to work, going to different coffee shops, not coming to class. Those would all be impacts of a potential stalking situation that we would want to be looking into. And then we have sexual harassment, which has been around for quite some time, which covers two forms of prohibited behavior. Hostile environment, which is very similar to the construct that I described in the harassment for discrimination, so severe, pervasive, ongoing behavior that's creating some kind of a negative impact for the individual. And then a quid pro quo scenario, so I'll give you this or I'll take this away if you don't do something for me, usually with some kind of sexual connotation tagged to that for it to be a sexual harassment case. The policy applies to all students, faculty, staff, contractors, patients, volunteers, affiliated entities, and other third parties. I really read that to be that the policy both applies to all folks who are on campus for any reason, and it protects everyone on campus for any reason. So if people are experiencing some kind of discrimination or sexual misconduct, or they're engaging in that, our office wants to know so that we might be able to take a look at that and see if we can figure out how to stop that behavior, prevent that from continuing. If they're not affiliated with campus, they're patients or visitors or something like that, a lot of times we'll work with the police department to kind of explain to them the impact that they're having on the environment and let them know that they're not welcome on our campus if they don't change their behavior.
Mm-hmm. Any questions about these? I really like to point out, especially with the social media age and stalking, how while we'll look at intent versus impact, sometimes with social media, let's say someone blocked you from their page and now you're logging into another friend's page to see, what's going on. Well, within a certain context, that could fall under stalking as well. So we just like to put that out there since that's another layer to add on to it. During our revisions of the sexual misconduct policy, we also added in prohibited behaviors. So how it used to be is retaliation was strictly up under that policy, but now we took that out to put it into this section called related violations. So one would be a failure to report. So someone that's a responsible employee that knowingly, intentionally, recklessly neglected to file a report with our office. We can now consider that a prohibited violation within this sexual misconduct policy. The retaliation piece, Will spoke to that a little bit, that adverse educational or employment action, direct or indirect, intimidation, interfering with someone being able to report, or now they're suffering some sort of consequence because they filed a report against your office. That would fall under the retaliation piece.
Sure. So the other policies that we added, providing false or misleading information. Again, I think that it's fairly self-explanatory that would be something that we wouldn't like folks to be engaging in, but we wanted to make it clear that that is our expectation, that while folks are interacting with our office, that they're providing that information in good faith, and they're not intentionally providing misleading information. So if we're in an investigation, working through that situation, and it comes to our attention that potentially somebody has knowingly lied to our office or provided false information, then we have the ability to look at that as a policy violation and investigate that separately from the other issues that we may be investigating related to the case. And then interference with reporting. Again, some way prohibiting or discouraging someone from reporting an incident of sexual misconduct or discrimination harassment, again, now can be a violation that we will likely look into and investigate to ensure that that stops. And then failure to comply with any orders. So while we're working through a situation, whether that's informally, formally, we may enact certain interim measures. So it could be a no contact order, a limited exclusion, a relocation to a different work environment or supervisor. If someone's not abiding by that directive that we've given them while that investigation is underway, then we'll open an investigation and kind of look into that as a violation of the policy. Likely look at a potential escalated response. So maybe if we've issued a no contact and the person's not abiding by that, then we may look at putting that person on administrative leave or removing them from the environment while we finish that investigation. Again, so the person who's on the other end of that can really focus on their work, get to the important things that they're doing here at the university, and we can finish that investigation. This also applies to sanctions. So if at the end of the investigation, our office recommends or determines that there are sanctions necessary to kind of remedy the effects of the discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct, if the person isn't complying by that, then we have the ability to just let them know, hey, that is a violation of the policy. It is our expectation that those things get completed in a timely manner. We'll follow up and ensure that that stuff is getting done.
And the interference with reporting could also look like maybe someone's telling you, I think I need to file a report with the Office of Equity because of X, Y, Z. And the person they're confiding in tells them, you know what, we can handle this in-house. You don't need to, we can make sure you're protected. We can make sure that could possibly also be an interference with reporting. Any questions about the related violations of prohibited behaviors? Okay. All right, so some more for you. And understanding, now that you understand our sexual misconduct policy, we're going to go over some more scenarios for you. So a boss frequently compliments only the women in the office on how nice they look. Is that a violation of the sexual misconduct policy? I see some awkward stares. That's okay. What are our thoughts?
What do we think on its face? Are there things that stand out in that scenario as potentially problematic? I see some head nods.
Can be either.
It could be either. You think it's not sexual misconduct? Okay. Can you help us understand a little bit why? Sure. Yeah. It definitely, yes.
Depends on how the compliment's given.
Thank you. I think that that's a very important component. There's certainly a more appropriate way to compliment someone. You look very nice today versus, wow, that's a really sexy skirt. This would be very different context, very different facts for our office to consider. I think that in this situation, we're kind of leaning at only the women are being complimented on how they look, and maybe that's the only sort of compliment that that person is getting. There's no comment about the work that they're doing in the environment or the qualifications or experience that they bring to the situation. Maybe it is really devaluing their experience and expertise that they're bringing to the environment, and they don't feel like they're being recognized for the real reasons they're here. Really, someone's just commenting on their looks. I don't think every single compliment is going to rise to the level of sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. But again, if that's all the feedback that the person is getting, then it could certainly become more problematic.
All right. Asking sexual questions such as inquiries about someone's sexual history or their sexual orientation. Ooh, the awkward looks again. I love it. What are our thoughts? Can't do it. Someone's like, absolutely not. Don't touch that. Okay? Other folks' thoughts? I just see like people just shaking their head no. Yeah, so we can see how this can certainly lend along the lines of being a policy violation. Also, it's nobody's business, if I'm just being frank. And it could very, very much put someone in an uncomfortable position, especially if there's some power dynamics, or if that's your supervisor, or you're feeling like you have to answer because if you don't, maybe you'll be retaliated against, etc. And it can be alienating for the person that's on the receiving end of that. Did you want to add anything else? Okay. Any questions about that one or confusion? Okay. You overhear a group of students rating their sexual activity or performance of another group. It happens. Just saying. What are our thoughts? Again, shaking head. My friend over there is like, just don't do it. Okay, yeah, so that can definitely be a policy violation as well. A colleague watches porn on mute during class.
Good morning.
Good morning. What are our thoughts? I mean, if this is your deal, that's your business. It's just during the class, and that can be a hostile environment for folks. I've had some students say, but what if no one knows that you're watching it? Is it a policy violation? And I was kind of left silent when they said that, because I'm like, well, if no one knows, I mean, I guess no, right? All right. A staff member asked their colleague, oh, sorry, did someone say something? Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it really had me stumped. I was like, well, okay. A staff member asked their colleague out on a date. This is where it gets silent and awkward. Is this a policy violation? It is not. It is not a policy violation. So we have a conflicts of interest in amorous relationship policy. And so that's with anybody that's in an evaluative authority that's dating someone. All we ask is that you notify that supervisor by all parties involved. That way they can determine a new supervisor for that person, just to protect all folks involved, just in case maybe it does turn into an intimate partner abuse, or maybe there's some favoritism, some discrimination, some retaliation if things go south. So we really leave that up to the department to handle. Where our office will come in is if things go south and we need to kind of do an investigation or help kind of do some protective measures or interim measures for that. But this applies, oh, go ahead.
Yep. So the policy doesn't prohibit this, even if there is that power differential.
Yep.
All it requires is disclosure so that we can alleviate that evaluative authority for that relationship. So it may be moving supervisors, moving to a different department, for students moving to a different class or section. But again, we just need to be on notice so that we can work to alleviate any potential conflict of interest that exist.
Any questions about that one? Okay.
All right. So a little bit about how the process works. We'll give you the 50,000-foot view. We get some kind of information either through an email, phone call. We have an online report form. We take a look at the information and then look at the policies that we have and see, does that information suggest that there might be a violation of one of the policies that we oversee? If so, we'll typically reach out to the impacted party to try to gather additional information. So we do that via email. We'll usually do that 2 to 3 times depending on the circumstance. Let the person know we're interested in learning more about the situation to see how we might be able to help in the situation. We do an initial intake. In that intake, we're evaluating for safety concerns, potentially looking at those interim measures that I discussed earlier. What can we do to that person to kind of help them feel a little more comfortable in the environment while we decide what the appropriate response is, whether it's going to be an informal resolution, formal resolution, or what. So really right on the front end, trying to establish a little bit more comfortable working environment for the person experiencing that behavior. So we do that initial intake, conduct what we call a small eye investigation or an inquiry, really looking at what's the additional information available that we might be able to look at to see, help kind of make the case or explain a little bit more the circumstance around what's going on. And then we take the information and say, assuming that everything that we've heard up to this point is true, is it likely to rise to the level of a policy violation? If that's true, and the person is interested in our conducting a formal investigation, then we'll launch what we call a formal investigation. That situation starts with notice to both parties, kind of letting them know, here's the situation that's been reported to our office, here are the allegations, potential policy violations, any interim measures that we've enacted, and then we work on the investigation side. So we allow the person who's being accused to come in, share their side of the story, explain their perspective. Yes? Yeah. So if the person is not interested in participating in an investigation, we may not be able to gather the information necessary to conduct that investigation thoroughly. So if we can't get them to provide a statement or additional information along the way through that investigation, then it's going to be very difficult in a lot of circumstances to get to the point of where we can say, yes, there was a violation of policy. So there are times that folks may want us to just do something informally, address the behavior informally, have a conversation with the person, document the concern, provide some support measures, and that's not going to be the formal investigation approach. So it doesn't always go that route, but it is certainly available if we feel like that's the most appropriate response and the person is interested.
Good question.
What's that?
I just said good question.
So the large eye investigation, again, we gather all the information we can, maybe interview witnesses, gather relevant evidence, emails, pictures, text messages, phone logs, those sorts of things, and then really try to make a determination on to whether or not it's more likely or not that the violation happened, so that the behavior did take place as alleged. If that is the case, then we'll likely land in a situation where there is a violation of policy, and in that situation we'll refer back to the department if they're an employee in terms of issuing any educational sanctions or sanctions that are necessary. So could really range from a written warning, additional training, decrease in pay, leave without pay, termination in very serious circumstances, and then the department or the supervisor evaluating authority is really kind of on the hook to kind of ensure that those things are getting addressed along the way. If for some reason they're not, we'll follow up with them to say, hey, we don't have documentation that this took place. Can we follow up and make sure that that gets done? If there is not a policy violation, then we're still going to look at what we might be able to do for that person who reported that concern to see, can we alleviate the concerns that they have in some other way? So it might be, again, looking at some of those informal options, really looking at trying to address the behavior that doesn't involve a discipline against the person who was accused and not found responsible. Informal resolutions can cover a broad spectrum. Sometimes it's really just making a report to the office, letting folks know that the incident took place. They may not be ready at that point to do something formally. A lot of times we'll hear from folks, I just want it reported. That way, if somebody else has a similar situation, that then we'll have more information to move forward with at that time. We do, on rare occasions, mediation where both parties are interested and we think that that's appropriate. So bringing the parties together and talking through the situation and really trying to find a resolution that works for both parties. We do oftentimes meet with the person who's alleged, like I mentioned earlier in that informal, just kind of letting them know, here's the concern that was raised, here's the impact that that's having on the environment, and here are our expectations regarding these policies moving forward.
Thank you. All right, so we've been talking a lot about failure to report if you're a responsible employee. And basically what that means is you are considered by the university a mandatory reporter. So if within your job function you can do any of these, so that hiring, promoting, discipline, evaluating, formally advising, direct faculty, staff, or students, you are considered what we call a responsible employee. So whenever you're not in your clinical care, offering care to patients, etc., but these fall within your categories, and let's say you're working with a colleague or it's in the department, your responsible employee hat would be put on. Does that make sense? I know it gets kind of confusing. But just think whenever you're not providing care and you still have these functions, I'm in my responsible employee role. And so what that means is that you are legally obligated to make reports that come to you. This could be things that you're hearing, just kind of going around in the office. If you're walking by and you hear something concerning, if you notice some behaviors and things like that, we do require you to make a report to our office. And that's just to make sure, it's on all of us to make sure our campus is safe and inclusive. And so we have folks that call and they just say, this happened. Is this something I should report? We also have folks that call and say, hypothetically, if this was going on, would this be something that I need to report or should report? Or does this go to HR? Or does it go to the Office of Professionalism? So we get various calls. That's why we like to be upfront and personal with you all, just to let you know we don't bite, we're not scary. So we have folks that call us all sorts of times during the day and just say, this happened, what do I do? And we walk them through that. But does anyone have questions on this responsible employee piece? We'll get more into it, but just on face value with what you see. Any questions? Okay. All right, so about your obligation to report. So if you have this information up top, you must promptly report this to our office. So if you have the names of the people involved, any witnesses, when and where, any other details about the incident, if you have that information, you're required to send that off. We are not asking you to be investigators in that. So let's say someone comes up to you and they say, this happened to me this weekend. We don't need you to say, okay, who did it and where is this and how this happened and where were you and were there cameras? Whatever they give you, just give to us. We have trauma-informed, trained investigators that can go through that, and we really want to limit the amount of times that someone has to tell and share their story, just to avoid re-victimization and re-traumatization as well. But this also includes, as I said earlier, third-party reports, anonymous reports, and off-campus incidents. So that's one we really like to make clear, because some folks think, well, it didn't happen on the university, so someone else should handle it. Only one party needs to be affiliated with our campus in order for us to help. So this certainly is important, especially in intimate partner abuse situations. Let's say their partner is not here, does not work here, but they are being impacted, and it's having an impact on them and the work they're doing, and they're not feeling safe. So we can still intervene and help that person figure things out in whichever route they want to take. Any other questions? We kind of spoke to, like, it's an expectation that we can all do things, avoid the re-traumatization, and we can also connect them with resources as well. Okay. All right. So we get this a lot where folks are like, you know, I'm a trusted colleague. People just confide in me. I don't want to get into a sticky situation where I have to report. And so that's why, we do these trainings. That's why we notify people that responsible employees do exist, just so that you all are in the know. What we've crafted here is just a basic paragraph. You can tailor this to fit your style, but there's some important pieces in here. Basically saying, based on what you share with me, I have to tell the Office of Equity, so notifying them that you have to file the report, because how awkward would that be if we reach out to them and they have no idea that you told us about it. Also, however, it is up to you if you want to tell them more. So interaction with our office is completely voluntary. We are legally obligated to provide that outreach and to provide resources for the person impacted by whatever they're experiencing, okay? So we have folks that we reach out to them a few times and they don't interact with us, and that's okay. We just want to make sure they have access to resources. They can take us up on it now, later, 3 years from now. As long as we provide that initial outreach, that's our main concern as well. And then also letting them know you can get them connected with a confidential resource as well. So on our website, we have confidential resources on campus, off campus, and other folks you can also talk to if you're not sure about talking to us, the person that's impacted just yet. And then there's also no punishment for them choosing not to participate. Anything?
Does anybody know who the confidential resources are for this campus? Have you all heard of the Phoenix Center? Yeah, I see some nods. It's a interpersonal violence advocacy office that was newly formed out here at the Anschutz campus, providing services to folks who've been impacted by dating violence, stalking, sexual assault. They are one of the confidential resources. The Ombuds office, student mental health, is a confidential resource for students, as well as the health center on campus are our confidential spaces here. So if someone is interested in kind of learning a little bit more about the process, the procedures, but doesn't really want to work directly with our office at this point, they want to understand what that might look like, might be a good referral to one of these other offices so that they can kind of talk through that process, think about what that might look like.
And we also have, go ahead.
The other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is we can certainly coordinate with folks if they're interested in reporting to law enforcement. It doesn't kind of alleviate our obligation from the university to look at it administratively, but if a person is interested in pursuing criminal charges, then we can connect them with that law enforcement agency and ensure that that information is reported and that investigation can take place through the law enforcement side.
Here you are.
So some helpful things to say. Thank you for trusting me with this. You didn't deserve this to happen to you. Might I connect you with somebody who can tell you more about your options? Less helpful, things like, why didn't you drink less that night? Why didn't you wear less provocative clothes? Why didn't you fight, argue? You have to tell the Office of Equity, make a police report, do something about this situation. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. I know that person. I don't think that they would really do that. So it must have been, just a misunderstanding. I know that they would never do that. Again, these are all things that are really telling that person that they're not being believed and that you're not there to kind of be a helpful or supportive person. And so what we know from research is that if someone gets a more favorable response, so the things on what to say on this side, they're less likely to experience higher rates of post-traumatic stress. So really, even if there is no justice kind of through the process, just that experience alone of being believed, kind of heard, supported, helps them a long way down the road to having like a better response at the end of it all. So again, just giving you some helpful things to think about, some things definitely to put into the maybe I shouldn't say that category if someone is to disclose this information to you in the work setting.
And so we just wanted to leave you all with that note, just some tips to boost your toolkit. Here is our contact information. Will's number's at the top, mine is in the middle. Again, call us for anything and everything. We can help you figure it out and reroute if it doesn't necessarily fall under the scope of our office. Any questions? Yes?
It almost feels like getting the police involved in some of these things was an afterthought. Don't you think that some of these things the police should be called first for, like the murder violence and things like that, and then would you still want to be called about that?
Yeah, so the law enforcement side is definitely something that we let folks know is an option. We can't, by our guidance from the federal government, encourage them or discourage them from reporting to the police. There are a lot of reasons that folks might not want to include law enforcement in response to any of these situations, but we're obligated as the university to kind of address this from an administrative standpoint. So on the front end, we do ask folks whether or not they want to contact law enforcement, what that might look like. Sometimes we'll let them call law enforcement from our office and ask a lot of questions. What does it look like? What does the reporting process look like? Where can I go to make a report? All of those things, again, just so that that person can make a more informed response. I definitely understand this kind of rub with these are law enforcement issues. They should be involved. I wholeheartedly agree. But it's not our position or responsibility to force people to make that report to the police. If there is an ongoing safety concern or we have a pattern of predatory behavior that's being reported to our office, we're going to be obligated to report those situations to the police. And again, ensuring that there is a broader campus safety concern, making sure that our law enforcement is aware of those and can start addressing those from that side. But if it is just kind of a one-off situation that somebody's experienced, even if it is really troubling, we can't force them to make that report to law enforcement.
Good question. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Okay. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Have a good morning, Monday morning. Will and I will hang around up front in case you want to talk to us in private.